I still remember a moment at a small family gathering that felt almost too ordinary to matter, until it did. Two children were sitting on the floor with a simple board game between them. Nothing serious, nothing expensive, just one of those games adults usually ignore until the noise starts. One child lost. Instantly, the entire room changed tone. What was supposed to be a light moment turned into folded arms, a sharp, "I'm not playing again," and a dramatic exit that made even the adults glance up from their conversations. No tears at first, just anger, controlled but boiling underneath. And here's what caught my attention. It wasn't the loss that was the real issue. It was what the loss meant to the child. In that instant, losing wasn't, "I didn't win this round." It translated into, "I am not good enough." Or worse, "I was made to be embarrassed." Most adults see it and label it quickly: bad attitude, poor sportsmanship, being dramatic. But over the years, I've learned that what looks like arrogance or stubbornness in a child is often something far more delicate underneath: an emotional system that hasn't yet learned how to survive disappointment without collapsing. And if you don't understand that part first, every correction you try afterward will miss the real problem entirely. That reaction didn't come out of nowhere, and it rarely does. When a child becomes what adults call a sore loser, it usually follows a very predictable pattern in everyday life. You see it in small, almost invisible moments before it ever shows up in full force. Take something as simple as a board game at home. The child starts off excited, fully engaged, talking big, imagining victory before the game even progresses. But the moment the outcome starts shifting away from them, their energy changes. The jokes stop. The focus tightens. You could almost see the emotional temperature rising. Then comes the loss. And what follows can look different from child to child, but it usually falls into a few recognizable behaviors. Some shut down completely, silent, withdrawn, refusing to continue. Others explode: anger, accusations, blaming the game, the rules, or even other players. A few try to rewrite reality altogether. "That doesn't count. You cheated." Or, "I wasn't trying anyway." What adults often miss is that this isn't about the game at all. The game is just the trigger. The real issue is what the child believes the outcome says about them. In many homes, winning is quietly celebrated in a way that feels louder than it should. Praise comes fast and enthusiastic when a child wins. Smiles, attention, maybe even comparison with siblings or peers. But losing? That moment often comes with impatience, dismissal, or an uncomfortable silence that children learn to fear. So over time, the child starts associating losing with something heavier than it actually is. Not just disappointment, but emotional rejection, embarrassment, or loss of attention. And because children don't yet have fully developed emotional regulation systems, especially in the prefrontal cortex, they don't process that feeling calmly. Instead, it spills out in behavior. The reaction becomes the outlet for an internal overload they cannot yet explain. This is why you'll often see sore loser behavior most strongly in situations where the child cares the most: games they think they should win, or environments where they feel watched, compared, or judged. So what looks like bad manners is often actually a very young brain trying and failing to manage emotional pressure in real time. To really understand this behavior, you have to look beyond the surface reaction and into how a child's emotional wiring is still under construction. At the core of sore loser behavior is something psychologists call frustration tolerance: the ability to sit with disappointment without losing emotional control. In adults, this is usually automatic. In children, it is still being built through repeated experiences of winning, losing, and everything in between. Now, here's the part many people miss. The brain systems responsible for emotional control, especially the prefrontal cortex, are still developing well into adolescence. So when a child loses, the emotional centers of the brain, particularly the amygdala, can react faster and louder than the rational system can calm things down. That imbalance creates what looks like an overreaction, but is actually just an underregulated system doing its job imperfectly. But there's another layer that matters even more: mindset formation. Children gradually form beliefs about what outcomes mean. In some environments, they begin to internalize a fixed mindset, the idea that winning equals being smart, good, or valuable, while losing equals being less capable or less worthy. Once that belief takes root, every loss stops being just an event and becomes a threat to identity. So instead of thinking, I lost this game, the internal translation becomes, I am a loser. And that shift is emotionally explosive for a child who doesn't yet have tools to separate performance from self worth. On top of that, the brain's reward system plays a quiet but powerful role. Winning triggers dopamine release, the brain's reward chemical, which creates a strong emotional high. For some children, especially those who are sensitive to reward feedback, this makes winning feel intensely reinforcing. Losing, by contrast, feels like a sharp drop, almost like withdrawal. This is why some kids don't just dislike losing, they physically and emotionally struggle with it. Their system has learned to chase the high of winning and resist the discomfort of losing at almost any cost. So when you combine an underdeveloped emotional regulation system, a growing but fragile sense of identity, and a reward system that strongly reinforces success, you get a child who doesn't just lose a game. You get a child who feels like something about them has gone wrong. And once that interpretation sets in, every future loss becomes heavier than the last. This behavior doesn't show up randomly. It shows up in very specific environments where pressure, attention, and emotional stakes quietly stack up. One of the most common triggers is family game settings. What looks like harmless fun to adults often carries hidden weight for a child. There's laughter, but also observation. There's play, but also subtle comparison. A child quickly learns who wins often, who gets praised, and who gets teased lightly for losing. Even jokes that seem harmless can land as emotional pressure when a child is already sensitive to outcomes. Then there's school competition, sports days, quizzes, classroom rankings. These environments are structured around performance, and children pick up on that immediately. Even when teachers try to emphasize participation, children are far more sensitive to the visible winners. The child who struggles with losing doesn't just see results, they see social positioning being formed in real time. Another major trigger is sibling or peer comparison. This is where sore loser behavior can intensify significantly. If a child constantly feels like they are being measured against someone else, your brother did better, your friend finished faster, then every loss stops being isolated. It becomes part of an ongoing internal scoreboard they feel they are always behind on. Digital games add another layer entirely. Many modern games are designed with instant feedback loops: wins, losses, rankings, sound effects, visual rewards. For a child still developing emotional regulation, this rapid cycle of reward and punishment can exaggerate reactions. Losing doesn't just feel like losing, it feels immediate, loud, and repetitive. But there is something even more subtle that often makes things worse: inconsistent adult reactions. Sometimes adults laugh it off. Don't worry, it's just a game. Other times, frustration comes out sharply. Stop behaving like this. And occasionally, to avoid conflict altogether, adults quietly let the child win. From the child's perspective, the emotional rules keep changing. And when emotional rules are unpredictable, children don't learn regulation. They learn reaction patterns. So what ends up happening is not just one trigger, but a combination. Environments where performance feels visible, comparison feels constant, feedback feels immediate, and emotional expectations feel unclear. In those conditions, losing doesn't stay a small moment. It becomes a high-pressure emotional event every single time. When you step back and look at the full picture, the sore loser label starts to feel too small for what's actually happening. What you're really seeing is a child who hasn't yet learned how to separate outcome from identity. Losing feels personal, not situational. And because their emotional regulation system is still developing, that feeling doesn't stay quiet. It comes out as anger, withdrawal, blame, or refusal. The important shift for any adult is this: the goal is not to stop a child from feeling disappointed. Disappointment is healthy. It teaches perspective, patience, and resilience. The real goal is to teach them how to recover from disappointment without falling apart emotionally or attacking themselves and others in the process. That starts with how losing is framed in everyday life. If winning is celebrated loudly, but losing is brushed off awkwardly, or worse, punished emotionally, children will naturally treat loss as something dangerous. But when losing is treated as a normal, expected part of play, it slowly loses its emotional weight. Just as important is what children hear in those moments. Not lectures, not comparisons, but calm language that separates performance from identity. Something as simple as acknowledging the feeling, "I see you're upset you lost," and reinforcing effort over outcome begins to reshape how the brain interprets failure over time. And perhaps the most powerful lesson is one children rarely get verbally, but always absorb visually: how adults handle their own small losses. Whether it's traffic frustration, work mistakes, or everyday setbacks, children are constantly watching how disappointment is processed in real life. Over time, the aim is not to raise a child who enjoys losing. That's unrealistic. The aim is to raise a child who doesn't fear it, doesn't crumble under it, and doesn't let it define them. If you've ever dealt with this in your home or seen it unfold around you, share your experience in the comments. I read through them and respond when I can. Like, share, and subscribe for more honest conversations on parenting and adolescent psychology that actually reflect real life, not theory.